Hey beautiful people, this video is about how to handle negative feedback as a leader, how to move from criticism into coordination. What do you do when you're the one under the microscope? Why is it that leaders who avoid feedback also struggle to build trust? And how do great leaders transform criticism into commitment? By the end of this video, I want you to be able to see how to respond to negative feedback even when it stings, and how to do it in a way that produces trust, produces clarity, and actually increases your confidence. Leadership doesn't mean that you're above feedback, unfortunately. Well, feedback's super useful, but it's really hard to receive. But it does mean that you need to be the person who's modeling how to receive it. People aren't just watching what you say, they're watching how you react. They're watching how you deal with things under pressure, under adverse circumstances, because they're smart enough to know that adverse circumstances happen quite a lot. And they also want to know that if you're joining the leadership team, or you're joining a leadership team at any level or any department in your organization, that you're going to be a solid person. You're going to be there for them when the proverbial hits the fan, that you're going to be responsible and be able to manage yourself and speak up as needed. That's the sort of person that most people look to have on their team, because they know those sort of people are going to be good in an emergency or under pressure in a problem, and they're going to have their back. Feedback can become a leadership moment the moment you receive it. So how you choose to respond to it is going to be incredibly important for how the person sitting across from you or on the Zoom call with you really understands your confidence, your integrity, your level of trust with them. Negative feedback is often more to do with an unmet concern than it is to do with you doing something wrong per se. Now, one thing to remember when you are receiving feedback is that most people are really uncomfortable giving feedback. So, as are you more than likely. But what you can do over time is that you can build the ability to be able to help people be more comfortable giving feedback to you. And here's why this is super valuable and important, is if you're the person who always gets upset, gets bent out of shape, gets defensive when someone gives you feedback, what you will discover is people will just stop giving you feedback. They will just work around you. They'll find other people to help them, and they'll just circumvent you, and you will get left behind, literally left behind, and you will reduce your opportunity and chances to be able to move into a leadership position or another leadership position. So make it easy for people to give you feedback. Now that sounds slightly crazy because it's hard to receive and it's hard to give. But if you look at it not in terms of a personal affront to you, but someone simply saying that there's a breakdown in the commitments that you have made to each other, then what you do is you open the door for the two of you, rather than standing in opposition to each other, standing side by side, metaphorically, or you could do it virtually if you want, in reality if you wanted to, but metaphorically standing side by side and really looking at, we have a problem together. How do we fix this problem together? So one of the most valuable things you can do when you receive feedback is not to respond immediately and to put yourself in a position of inquiry. You're trying to understand where the person is coming from. You're trying to understand why this is a breakdown for them. You're trying to understand what promise you broke or appeared to break for them. Remember when you're doing this that the breakdown is real for them. The story behind the breakdown or the impact of the breakdown might not be as real or might be less than they think it is. But the fact that there is a breakdown is something that you should absolutely be concerned about. And what I've found repeatedly with these types of conversations, when you're having them in a leadership position and someone comes to you and says, I remember I had one guy come into my office, stormed into my office, and he said, I'm really disappointed. And my response was, I'm really sorry you're disappointed, but if you could tell me what you're disappointed about and why you're disappointed, it'll really help me, because I'm assuming that you're not disappointed with me particularly, but you're disappointed with something that we're doing or not doing effectively together. So what I did with that was it immediately put it in the category of it's not me you're disappointed with, it's an action that we're taking together that you're disappointed with. So my interpretation of it was this guy had a habit of telling people he was disappointed with them, and I was simply not accepting that. I was saying, you're disappointed with some action that we're taking together. Let's have a look at that. And that had a really interesting effect of diffusing the anger around the conversation that he brought into my office. I was happily minding my own business, and he came into my office and just announced that he was disappointed. So I think if you can give yourself just that buffer space to be able to respond, acknowledging that it's a breakdown and it's something that has happened between you and another person that is not necessarily about you and you being bad or you being wrong or you being stupid. Important thing to do in these conversations is not to collapse into defensiveness or judgment or immediately respond, but really to look for clarity around where it's coming from, what their perception is, the impact that it's having on them, how it relates to the work that you're doing. And what you find if you can remain calm and breathe deeply and just ask questions from a place of inquiry without interrogating them, without trying to push the blame onto them. What you're doing is you're trying to see the world through their lens and understand how something that you've done has had an impact on them that isn't working effectively for them. We used to do ops reviews in a company I worked for, and they were actually fantastic, but they were incredibly hard. So you would go in front of an entire leadership committee of 6 or 8 people, and as a director, you were asked to give an operations review of your department for the last month or for the last quarter. I think it was monthly. It was monthly. And you would go in there and you would be looking at, what you accomplished, how you came close to your goals, where you had issues, what some of the breakdowns were, what's going on with the people in your department, what revenue you're contributing towards, what customer satisfaction you're delivering or contributing towards. And it was a full kind of 360 review of your department by 6 people. And I found myself, this was years ago, but I found myself getting quite defensive in some of those meetings because they were so stressful. And I had to teach myself how to be able to stop, breathe, and inquire, ask them what it was that they were seeing that they weren't satisfied with, and also what they were seeing that they were satisfied with. So remember, it always works 2 ways. But when you're doing it, give yourself time and space. Now, other thing to remember about this is when you're giving yourself time and space, it seems like endless time and space for you. It's a couple of seconds for the person on the other side of the conversation. So err on the side of just allowing yourself to ground yourself and breathe and really inquire before you respond. If you work in a mode of understanding who your internal customers are and making commitments to those customers, and this is something that I've talked about in many other videos, and I also speak about in my book, The Innovation Mindset. If you work in that mode of thinking of people as your customer and treating them as internal customers for work that needs to be done, and sometimes you are, of course, the customer yourself for other people, one of the ways that really helps you is you are always asking the question of the customer, what does success look like for you? So let's take the example of the guy who stormed into my office and announced that he was disappointed. I asked him, as I tried to sit in inquiry, and it was an effort, as I tried to sit in inquiry and understand where he was coming from with this and what was not working for him and where he saw I had not delivered for him, I was also interested in what does success look like for him. So once we'd had that first phase of the conversation, I understood where he was coming from and what breakdown he thought I had produced. I then moved to asking him, what would success look like for you? What is value for you in this particular situation? And as he began to articulate that, it was easy for me to be able to see how, in the absence of having understood that in the first place, my bad, that I and my team and I were not delivering to the level that he was looking for. So then I was the person who was receiving negative feedback as a leader, but was also in a position to be able to give a genuine and honest apology and say, look, this is absolutely something that we can do for you. Now that you and I are clear on what satisfaction means for you, my team can absolutely step up and deliver on that. And we actually ended up going on and doing numerous other projects very successfully together because we had been over this hump of having the difficult conversations as leaders and then being able to refine and calibrate our coordination with each other. So remember that these conversations, they can be difficult, they can be affronting, they can be awkward, uncomfortable. You have to learn new practices to be able to deal with them, but they can also be a huge source of building really powerful trust. And the other thing to remember is that every single person in a leadership position who is a good leader knows this because they have been through this process themselves. Other useful thing to do in here is declare that you're listening. Now that sounds like it's totally obvious because you're sitting in front of the person and you can't not hear them. But if you acknowledge that you are listening, it is a level of respect for the person that actually diffuses some of the energy or some of the anger around a breakdown that might be happening. So you can say things like, this is what I'm hearing, this is what I understand matters to you, this is what I understand satisfaction looks like for you. Now can you and I talk about how it is that I'm going to be able to work with your team to be able to deliver that satisfaction through my team with you. That's something you and I need to coordinate, and then we need to coordinate our people below that, and you and I need to stay in constant conversation with each other to make sure that that delivery is happening to your satisfaction and now to mine. Very useful thing to recognize is breakdowns happen all the time. It's life. There's not a whole lot you can do about them. You can anticipate some of them. I've talked about that in other videos. You can head some of them off at the pass. But in the end of the day, your ability to be able to deal with breakdowns efficiently and quickly and to be able to preempt them sometimes is going to contribute towards your confidence and your leadership capacity in a very powerful way. That applies here as well as it does anywhere else. Recognize that every single breakdown is an opportunity to lose trust or to build trust. So think of it in terms of a loop of trust. If someone is coming to you and they care enough about you to give you feedback or to quote unquote criticize you, that means that they're committed to your success as a leader. Acknowledging that, speaking that to them is something very valuable in terms of diffusing what is going on from an energetic standpoint in terms of people having to listen to difficult things from each other. What you will do in that is you will acknowledge that you are committed to building trust with them. I see you as my customer. I'm committed to building trust with you. I want to listen to what it is that you have to say. Can you help me understand how this breakdown is impacting you? Going through the recovery process builds more trust long term than simply dealing with the issue and trying to put it away. There was a great story about Lexus when they first introduced some of their very high-end vehicles, and they had a recall with it. And the way that they handled the recall actually built more customer satisfaction than other companies who didn't have a recall. So they took that breakdown and they used it as an opportunity to be able to build a higher level of trust with their customers. They lent their customers other cars, new cars, while they were repairing their existing car. They handled them incredibly carefully. They gave them a hotline to be able to call in on so that they could deal with the problem immediately. They allowed for the dealers to be able to have special service for those customers. And the customers went away feeling incredibly cared for, incredibly well looked after. And they also felt that they had an organization and a company and a car that they could absolutely rely on. They were honest, they declared the breakdown, they followed through, they closed the loop, they dealt with the criticism, and they used it as a way of consistently building trust going forward. Make sure that when someone comes in and declares a breakdown with you, or an entire committee of people tell you that they're not satisfied with something that you're doing, that you are creating a new commitment together. So it's not just something that you are going to do. It is going to be based on you recognizing them as customers and you making sure that you understand what it is it's going to take to satisfy them. Again, I talk about that in a number of other videos, but it's incredibly useful for you to be able to understand that don't walk out of those conversations without a new commitment, because that is your bridge to how it is you're going to work with that person going forward and how you are showing that you are able to deal with criticism and use it to actually improve the relationship rather than degrade it. I've done another video here on how to handle feedback that you don't agree with. That one is a more personal one. It's more for the individual, but as a leader, All feedback is really very individual. Really encourage you to have a look at that and see how that helps you as you build practice and competence in this area. I admire you enormously for looking to do this. It takes courage and it takes commitment. It will build your leadership capacity. Let me know how it works for you down in the comments. I'd love to hear about it, and I wish you the very best of luck with this.